Hello, so we're continuing with our story. We're on chapter 16 of MILELE. Welcome back. We left chapter 15 with Keiko having to leave Eden 2 because he's not well. We mentioned before that he cannot stay on the island for as long as he used to be able to. And he had actually became ill and was in the dome, which has a maintained atmosphere for those who are not compatible with the atmosphere of Eden 2. Also, Justin McNeil was admitted to the ICU because he ignored the 7th-day rest rule twice in a row, so he's quite ill. And we met a new character, a young lady named Anna Davis, who helps to look after baby Moses. And it ended with, the chapter 15 ended with a pretty serious threat from Keiko that if Hope pretty much didn't join him, it's possible that he would exile Nathan. All right, let's jump into the next chapter. Chapter 16. We're in Israel. Nathan read the words on the small piece of paper in his hand. It said, "We must leave tonight." He looked up from it to Faith's eyes and saw urgency there. They'd entered his hotel room together. For Nathan, it had been a full day of consulting and planning with Keiko Bates' security and travel detail, followed by the evening meal. When he'd left the dining hall with Faith, he'd been fully aware of the knowing looks from the other VIPs there. He was sure word had gotten around that the morally upright Nathaniel Kanisa had finally succumbed to temptations of the flesh. Now, if you remember, Nathan and Faith were sort of having a undercover, well, they were pretending to be lovers, but really she was an undercover agent with the underground Israeli loyals. Nathan hated the deception, but what else could he do? 3 previous innocent rendezvous with Faith had filled him in fairly well on the structure of the underground Israeli loyals, which worked tirelessly for Prince Adani. Their estimated numbers reached over 140,000. And they worked to ensure a future few barely understood. He worked for the present. They prepared for a world that would get considerably worse under the siege by the Council of Nations, possibly with Keiko at its head. But ultimately, they worked for a future with Prince Adani's total rule over all. Faith took the piece of paper from him, put it up against the door, and wrote again. Now, they are doing things with by messages because they're pretty sure that his room is bugged. She held the piece of paper out to him. It said, "He returns in the morning and will move full steam ahead with plans to rule the world," meaning Keiko, of course. Nathan clutched the paper. The reality of what she'd been prepping him for during their pseudo-trysts settled heavily on him. Faith moved impatiently, taking the paper again. She wrote and returned it to him. It said, "He means to use you and your sister as leverage." Faith turned her back to him, leaving him by the door, and went to sit in the living room. She seemed tired, leaning back in the sofa with her eyes closed. He wondered if he should offer her a drink. He glanced over at the small, compact kitchen, separated from the living room by a dining area. He never used the kitchen for more than just coffee. All his meals were taken in the main dining hall or in Keiko's grand luxury suite. Nathan started toward the kitchen, but then paused in his tracks. Faith's eyes had suddenly popped open and she became energized. Reaching into the pocket of her slacks, she pulled out what looked like a small pager and glanced at it. Standing up, she motioned for him to follow her. She moved through his bedroom to the spacious ensuite bathroom. After entering, she waited for him to follow, then closed the door and turned on the exhaust fan. He'd become used to the routine, not feeling as uncomfortable as the first time he'd been enclosed there with her. After turning on the bath water, she faced him. Her eyes held a bit of sparkle despite the seriousness of the situation. "Are you packed and ready?" Her voice was low, almost inaudible against the hum of the fan and the flow of the water into an impressive clawfoot tub. She'd squirted his personal shampoo in. The start of foam released a pleasant, moist fragrance. "Since the first time you instructed me." He also kept his voice low. "Good. I'll leave at the usual time, but this time you'll follow me after exactly 3 minutes. Tell them I forgot to take the gift you have for me. I'll be in the parking lot. We'll pretend to need more time with each other in your vehicle. You'll have to persuade security to turn a blind eye. You simply follow my lead from there." Nathan's mouth felt dry. His life was about to take a turn, and he wasn't sure what the outcome would be. All he knew was that the Israeli loyals were under strict instructions for the underground Israeli loyals to guard him with their life. His travels would take him from Israel to a world covered by darkness, that is, the mist, until he returned to Eden 2. It was imperative that he return there, as the island would eventually be cut off from the rest of the world forever. Nathan had never questioned whether he should trust these people, even this woman before him, who was risking her life for him. He just did. They were loyal to the same person, the son of the sovereign emperor, and therefore to the emperor himself. 3 minutes, he repeated, more to himself than her. Faith turned to look at the bath, then back at him. Her eyes spoke wordlessly. He smiled, though feeling a bit awkward, then turned to leave the bathroom. He knew she would enjoy her last bath there, maybe her last bath for many days. Once out of the bathroom, Nathan hurried over to the bed and picked up a large, sparkly blue gift bag that would serve as a prop for his belongings. A small backpack with some pertinent things remained on the bed. It would need to fit in the gift bag. After a careful scout of the room, he decided to change his clothes to something more casual. He pulled off his suit jacket, then began unbuttoning his shirt. He paused, staring at the gold pendant resting against his chest. He lifted it. It was the lion. He remembered after he and Hope had been given the necklaces. She'd complained to him in private that she should have gotten the lion instead of the lamb, since she was always sticking up for him. Nathan chuckled to himself. With their parents having been international consultants, he and Hope had experienced boarding school life. Her way of sticking up for him often meant she would interfere in what she perceived as him being bullied when, in fact, it was just rough play among boys. A sound from the bathroom woke Nathan from his reminiscing. He focused once more on the task at hand. Eden 2. "I wish you wouldn't keep blaming yourself," Vohan Batten said for the second time, sitting at a picnic table with Boa. Boa knew the man was trying to console him, but he was tired of people telling him the blame for Justin McNeil's condition did not lie on his doorstep. He let the words bounce off, wishing Ruth and Hope were with him instead. But on their day off, Ruth was catching up on some much-needed sleep after the ordeal with Keiko Bays, and Hope was in some sort of conference with Governor Peter and Agios, upset about something Keiko had said to her prior to him leaving the island. All Boa could think was, good riddance. Justin McNeil was still not responsive and continued his sleep of recovery, the longest on Eden 2 record. But then no one else had managed to break the rest cycle twice in a row, and it still wasn't understood why people fell ill after working more than 6 days in a row. Agios had instructed Hope on key ways to live healthily on the island, but at first it had not been integrated into Eden 2's mandate. Boa remembered how he'd been one of the few to support Hope until the rest of the island finally discovered the importance of her revelations. She'd eventually created a guide that coincided remarkably with the Truth Tome and regularly included it in her Nutrition and Wellness Center instructions. Nutrition, exercise, fresh air, sunshine, and rest intertwined with mental and spiritual health. He knew that reading the Truth Tome and spending quality time with Agios and others refreshed the minds and spirits of the island's residents. It wasn't quite understood how Agios managed to spend time with everyone. Somehow he did. Perhaps that's what Justin had been missing. More than the physical rest, the mental and spiritual health. Boa's elbows slid off the table as he swiveled on the bench to face Vohan. He was my responsibility, Vohan. Mine. I look after my men and they look after the other workers. Yes, but Boa held up a hand. I've made my decision. I'll get permission for you to supervise the fishing expeditions, and I'll return fully as everyone team leader. But, Vohan started to say. But Boa interrupted. You're fully capable, and you fit in well. Vohan stood up, fists balled at his sides, visibly upset. I don't wish to be supervisor of fishing or anything for that matter. You already have expert leaders. Let them take on the role, and I'll continue to assist. A shift in wind ruffled the older man's graying hair, but his eyes remained intent, his frame rigid. Take it easy, Vohan, Boa said, puzzled at the man's strong reaction. He calmly motioned for Vohan to sit back down. I certainly won't force it on you. I just thought, since you were so eager to leave the fields and seemed to love working on the water, I just thought you'd relish the chance to advance. It took a moment for Vohan to relax. He lowered himself almost gingerly on the bench. His back was to the table, his profile to Boa, his hands clenched between his thighs. It's not that I don't like the work, I just don't want a role where I need to supervise others, Vohan said. Why not? You sometimes fill that role anyway, especially with the boys. Boa was genuinely surprised. Shaking his head, Vohan remained adamant. No, it's not allowed. He suddenly stopped, then threw Boa an uneasy look. Boa frowned. Not allowed? What do you mean? Vohan faced forward again. I mean, when I came here, I promised myself I would always be humble, always grateful for the opportunity to be one of the chosen. I promised I would never accept a role higher than my calling. Boa couldn't fathom why Vohan would place such restrictions on himself, but he decided not to press anymore. All right, Vohan, have it your way, but if you ever change your mind, please let me know. Vohan made quick eye contact, then looked away. Good enough, thank you. Boa! Boa! Boa turned to see Ruth, with Cree and Lucas following her, jogging from near the front of the hub and heading in his direction. The boys soon whipped around her, laughing in excitement. Boa got up, moving quickly to meet them. Vohan followed. After grabbing Boa's arms and between ragged breaths, Ruth managed to say, He's awake. Justin is awake. Yeah, like he was never sick, Cree announced. It was Agios, Lucas added, grinning from ear to ear. New scene. I know he will not rest until I leave this place and go with him on his stupid Hope, Governor Peter called. Tour, I wish he'd never set foot on this island. Hope, just as well he keeps getting sick here. Sit down. Hope stopped and sat, suddenly feeling self-conscious at what Governor Peter must be thinking. Even though Agios was also present, most of her rant had been directed at the governor. Since they had met in the conference room 10 minutes ago, Agios had stood silently with his back to one of the tall windows. Now he turned away and looked out the window, and Hope suddenly felt like crying. Maybe it was because she was still recuperating from the strange experience in the mist patch. Maybe it was because she didn't want to leave baby Moses. Now added was a threat against the person closest to her in all the world, her brother. But it certainly didn't help that Agios now had his back to her. From across the table, Governor Peter spoke again. I understand your frustration, Hope, and we'll do everything we can to ensure your stay here and Nathan's safety. A letter has already been sent on a supply ship regarding your reluctance to tour with the World Envoy, but we'll send another concerning the implications for your brother. She knew the governor meant well, that he was trying to placate her, give her hope. Surely someone on the Council of Nations will see through his actions towards you and your brother. Perhaps those who voted against his plan to rule the world, the governor continued. But he doesn't need the majority for most of his decisions, as he does for the world rule. Hope sniffled, trying to hold back threatening tears. Nathan is his employee to do with as he wishes. Yes, but surely your brother's connection to you will put his well-being at foremost importance. Governor Peter sounded as if he was trying to convince even himself. Hope looked away from him to Agios. Agios was so silent. Her frustration, maybe anger, grew. He seemed present in body but not in spirit. Yet, without being able to explain it, she sensed his concern and compassion. There was also something else, communion, as if he were listening to someone else. This wasn't the first time she'd witnessed this. Long ago, the first time she'd asked, she'd been given an explanation. It had been a few weeks after Agios had rescued her from the ocean. He had disappeared for a while, but she'd eventually found him by the water's edge. He'd been looking out as if listening to something or someone. When she'd asked what he was doing, he had said, "What he tells me to do, I do. I pass on what he gives me to you." He'd been teaching her many things those days. He was still teaching her, the others, about Prince Adani's ways. Agios, after all, was the extension of the sovereign's presence in the world. At the time, she'd also asked about Prince Adani. "Why can't I hear him?" she had asked. Turning to her, Agios had smiled gently. "But you do. You hear him through me." Now, with Agios's vigil by the window, Governor Peter remained silent. They both did, instinctively knowing they should. After a moment, Agios turned and looked directly into Hope's eyes. His voice was calm but radiated a tangible power. He said, "When the time comes, the choice will be yours whether you go or not. However, your choice will determine the path, but not the finish." The surety of his words heartened her even as her mind didn't fully comprehend. He clarified for her. "Your end, no matter the difficulties, will be a good one. Do not fear or worry. It will work out good for Nathan, for you, and for the people of Eden too." Treading lightly, Agios moved to the edge of the table. "However, one choice will lead you to another that may result in the hardest path for you yet." Hope studied him intently, trying to gauge his words by his expression. Nothing had changed except the increased seriousness of his tone. "How will I know what choice not to make?" Hope asked, squelching a foreboding feeling. Agios's eyes bore into her. "Choose based on faith and hope and love. Do not choose out of fear." Israel. Even though he was only playing the role of an enamored fool, for Nathan, it was one of the hardest things he'd ever done, but it was working. The supervising night security had given him a polite response with a respectful nod befitting Nathan's stature as executive assistant to the world envoy. The supervising night security had given him a polite response with a respectful nod befitting Nathan's status as executive assistant to the world envoy. He then barked a command to a young soldier stationed in the lobby. Nathan lowered the gift bag, which had white gift tissue sticking out, to his side and waited for security to release the exit doors. Doors never seemed so slow in opening. He nodded his thanks and followed the young soldier out. Immediately, he saw Faith moving steadily in the hotel's parking lot. Security had been posted strategically around the fenced property and also manned the entrance to the hotel parking lot. The fencing only slightly diminished the grandness of the hotel. Despite the world's dire circumstances, Tel Aviv's elite district, now under martial rule, remained well maintained as befitting the supreme status of the world envoy and the 10 council of members. "Wait here, I'll quickly go to her," Nathan said, forcing a light tone to his voice. The young soldier seemed uncertain, but before he could protest, Nathan started a light jog toward Faith. By now, she'd stopped by the military jeep that was parked facing out. She looked up at his call, pretending to be surprised at his appearance. "Hug me," she whispered after he reached her. He could tell her eyes were on the young soldier, who was about 7 meters away. "Go back and tell him you'll just be in the vehicle with me for a bit, and then I'll escort you back in." He stepped back out of the hug, feeling uncertain. "Go," she hissed softly. "Be convincing." She pulled the gift bag from his hand. He took a deep breath, turned around, and jogged back. The young soldier was waiting patiently. I'll just be in the vehicle with her for a few minutes." Nathan tried a suggestive smile, then added a wink. "You know how it is. She'll escort me back." The man's, more boy's, expression was pained. Clearly, he wasn't used to dealing with love trysts involving dignitaries. Finally, after looking toward Faith, he nodded. "Yes, sir." He turned to go. Good boy, Nathan thought. He wasted no time in making his way back. Faith had already entered the vehicle. He let himself in. They waited until the young soldier had disappeared into the building, knowing he couldn't see them in the dark interior of the vehicle. The large gift bag in the back seat held his small computer and backpack with other personal things he didn't want to leave behind. "Now what?" he asked, trying to see her expression. Her eyes had remained focused on the entrance of the hotel. Now her gaze roamed the property. "Slowly, keep your head down. Move to the back seat, lay on the floor." He did as she asked, bumping his head a couple of times, finding it tricky to squeeze his almost 6-foot frame through and around the front seats. "There's a black blanket under the front passenger seat. Cover yourself completely." Again, he followed her instructions. "You good?" she asked quietly. He didn't know how she could be so calm. "Yes," he whispered. The vehicle started. "No matter what, keep down until I tell you otherwise." The vehicle started to move forward. A short moment later, it paused. Faith's voice sounded professional and light as she made small talk with the entrance security. He was apparently inspecting her security pass. In another few moments, the vehicle continued forward again. "Stay down," Faith warned again, her voice not as hushed this time. "Once I turn the corner and am out of sight, I'll need to increase speed gradually. In about 5 minutes, we'll take a side street where we'll need to vacate this vehicle for another. Then we must make it to a hidden tunnel outside the city. A hidden tunnel, Nathan thought. As if hearing his thoughts, Faith added, a secret tunnel only known to the underground Israeli loyals. Nathan's body moved with the swerve of the jeep around the corner. Then he felt the increase in speed. Pray we make it to the tunnel before your absence is noticed, Faith said. For more than one reason, Nathan was glad to be fleeing. The most pressing was Scarlet Babylon. The day after his first encounter with her, she'd insisted he dine with her in Keiko. He'd accepted her invitation reluctantly, not wanting to cause unnecessary ripples. The dinner in a private dining room at the hotel had been set for only 2. To distract Nathan himself from the present nerve-wracking journey, Nathan allowed the memory to surface. The smile across Scarlet Babylon's face didn't reach her eyes. I'm sorry, Nathan, she said. Keiko unexpectedly couldn't join us, but it'll be okay with just us, won't it? Her tone pulled at him flirtatiously. The meal was already laid out on an intimately, beautifully dressed table. 2 large candles in elaborate glass holders glowed in the dim room. Soft music lured his senses. She waited expectantly for him to seat her. An internal war brewed. A voice breathed in Nathan's ear. Flee, dear one. It was Agios. Nathan hesitated. Scarlet Babylon had so much power, so much influence. Her foundation regularly spread its message of mankind's evolution into godship, which was believed by many, sought after by many. But she was of the same kind as Keiko Bays and Mendex Nabun. There's much I can offer you, Nathan. There's also much I can take away. The smile seemed etched on her face, but her words and tone erased its charm. Flee, beloved one, the voice said again. Come to me, Scarlet continued. A tinkle of laughter followed. Even Keiko caves to me. He knew she and Keiko were involved in every way except intimately. Keiko treated her more like a sister, a confidant. Keiko prided himself in not belonging to any woman. After all, his aim was to rule the world. Unconsciously, Nathan moved backwards. Immediately, Scarlet's visage changed. Scorn and derision revealed themselves. Sweet coward, sweet fool, do you really think you won't eventually come? He didn't wait for more. Nathan fled. Now, at present, he was still fleeing, but fleeing with another woman, one who was already in his heart. With this one, he felt safe, like a ship finally reaching a sheltered bay after a treacherous storm at sea. And so that ends chapter 16 with Nathan fleeing with Faith. Hope you join me next time for chapter 17. Take care.